Let's walk through one example of a randomization test, similar to those that you might see on the lab assignment this week. Here's our research question. Do more than half of all World Campus students own a dog? Data were collected from a representative sample of 100 World Campus students. In that sample, 56 owned a dog. Using the 5 steps from the online notes, conduct a randomization test. In step 3, include a copy of your randomization dot plot from StatKey with the p-value area shaded. So let's go to the online notes to review those 5 steps. These are the 5 steps that you should be using this week. Step 1, determine what type of test you need to conduct and write the hypotheses. Step 2, construct a randomization distribution under the assumption that the null hypothesis is true. We'll be doing this in StatKey. Step 3, use the randomization distribution to find the p-value. We'll also be doing this in StatKey. Step 4, decide if you should reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Step 5, state a real-world conclusion in relation to the original research question. So let's go back to our scenario and start with step 1. We'll determine what type of test we're going to conduct, and we'll write our hypotheses. In this case, we have one sample, a sample of World Campus students. We have a categorical variable. We asked each student whether or not they own a dog. So we're looking at the proportion of students who own a dog. I'm going to insert an equation in order to write my hypotheses. Our null hypothesis, or H sub O, is that P, the population proportion, equals 0.5. Our alternative hypothesis, or H sub A, is that P is greater than 0.5 because our research question is asking if more than half own a dog. So if more than half own a dog, then P is greater than 0.5. Now that we know what tests we're going to perform and we have our hypotheses written, we can go to StatKey to construct our randomization distribution. We're conducting a randomization hypothesis test for a single proportion. We can edit the data. In our sample, 56 out of 100 said that they own a dog. We also need to consider the null hypothesis. Our null hypothesis was that P equals 0.5, which is actually the default in StatKey. So in this particular case, we do not need to change the null hypothesis value. We can just go ahead and generate a few thousand randomization samples. I like to take at least 5,000 samples. Sometimes Wiley Plus will even tell you to take as many as 8,000. This is step 2 in our 5-step procedure. Step 3 is to use this distribution to find our p-value. Recall that we have a right tail test. Our alternative hypothesis was that P was greater than 0.5. So we check right tail, and we'll have to change the number at the bottom because we want to find the area under this distribution that is greater than our observed sample proportion of 0.560. So we change this number to 0.560. The area that's shaded in red is our p-value. So P equals 0.133. On your lab assignment, you should take a screenshot of this randomization dot plot. I'm on a Mac, so I'm just going to click Command-Shift-4, and then I will select the area that I want. Back in my Word document, this is steps 2 and 3. I can insert that screenshot. Output without explanation is never sufficient, so we should always write something to the effect of the p-value is 0.133 so that it's clear that we know which one of the values from this distribution plot is our p-value. In step 4, we're going to make a decision to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Our p-value is 0.133, and that is greater than the standard alpha level of 0.05, so we fail to reject the null hypothesis. This means that there is not evidence that p is greater than 0.5, which brings us to step 5 when we write our real-world conclusion. So we go back to the original research question. Recall the original research question was whether or not there's evidence that more than half of World Campus students own a dog. So no, there is not evidence that more than half of all World Campus students own a dog. So when you're submitting your lab assignment this week, this is what it should look like. Step 1, clearly state the test that you're going to perform and your hypotheses. Steps 2 and 3 you can combine because the output will have the randomization plot with the p-value on it. Remember to also clearly state what your final answer is. So the p-value is, in this case, 0.133. In step 4, you either reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Those are the only two options. You never accept the null hypothesis. You fail to reject it. So in this case, we say there's not evidence that more than half of all World Campus students own a dog. If you have any questions, as always, please post them to the discussion board on Canvas.